to you. John is a good friend of the alumni. He has worked with us for many years, and he has worked as an AL on the a tutor on the B822 Creativity, Innovation and Change course. He worked on that for 14 years. He runs a very successful business, and he's going to share some of his secrets of innovation with us. So I will hand over to you now, John. So good evening.
Good evening, Janet, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining the webinar. And excuse me, I was kind of half expecting a response there, and I realise you can't actually speak back to me. So what I'd like to do is, as Janet said, I'm going to run through this presentation with you, and I do have a few questions. The questions will be in green on the screen, and those are the questions I'd like you to sort of respond to if you can. And we'll have a discussion, or I'll respond to your questions as we go through. So I'd like to, first of all, start with a question for you, and that is, what is your favourite innovation? And it could be the innovation of products or service that delights you the most. Could be technology, it could be social, it could be 2,000 years old, or launched yesterday. It might be small or large, of great import to the world, or like iTunes Genius, just kind of nice to have. So just have a think about that for about 30 seconds, and if you can send in something by chat, and I'll just pick out maybe 2 or 3, and please don't be offended if I don't choose you. Okay. So we've got the concept of zero, Concorde. I remember seeing that in its test flight, powered flight, the internet. Okay, these are going to be fast enough for me to read anyway. The wheel. Any more coming through? Smartphone. Archimedean screw. Concept of limited company, dishwasher. Thank you, Janet. Public clocks, putting structure on time. The walking train. Okay, so we've had quite a few come through. What was my reason for asking that question? Simply to remind us all that our goal as leaders is actually to innovate, and it's to come up with these fantastic innovations that you've seen come across your screen there. It's to solve the problems that people have and enrich their lives. And the danger is that we forget when we're working in organizations that that we're about innovating. We're not about managing innovation as such. Our end goal is to innovate. It's not about working out the finer details of the governance process. So, having started with that, what I'd like to do is just to say what our objective is tonight. And I'd like to answer 3 questions. Number 1 is, how can you cut through the complexity of innovation? How can you build the capability to innovate? And how can you foster a climate to innovate? And I hope we'll get through to the 3rd question, but there may be a lot of response from you to the first 2. If we don't get through to the 3rd, we've got an article and a climate questionnaire to send out to you at the end. So, to begin answering those questions, let's move to Dartmoor in England. This is a great wild expanse in the southwest of England. And I was in a team of 17-year-olds walking 45 miles across 10 hills, and we camped overnight. And in the morning, we woke to very, very thick fog. You could barely see in front of you. Now, many of us in the team didn't really know what to do. Some wanted to just stay where they were. Some kind of, oh, let's just start walking and see where we get to. But one boy took up his compass and navigated us to the next checkpoint by navigating to the nearest rocks and grassy mounds and using them to guide us. And he actually got us all the way to the next checkpoint where the fog actually lifted. And I just always remember that, as old as I am now, that what a complex feat of navigation that was. So what has that complex feat of navigation got to do with innovation? Well, it's a personal belief, is that innovation management has become very, very complex. It's a discipline in itself. And in fact, what I think it is a fog of complexity. So I would like to use that metaphor to explain how we can navigate that complexity. That complexity we can summarize really in 5 words. So we have culture, the whole ethos of being innovative in an organization, the climate that we build, leadership, the leaders taking on an innovative role, the approach that we take, what kind of methodologies we use, etc. Governance, the rules and regulations in place, and strategy. What kind of innovation do we want? What are we trying to achieve? Where are we trying to get to? So, okay, so I've just had a question, please, of will you define innovation, please, as you understand it? So my understanding, as I understand innovation, is, let's start with creativity. Creativity is developing ideas, and innovation is about implementing those ideas, getting those into action. And innovation management is about managing that whole area of creating ideas and implementing those ideas. So I hope that's, Samarandu, that answers your question. So if we have this complexity, which we summarized in those 5 words, then how might leaders respond to this complexity? So 3 responses are typical. 1, leaders close their eyes, metaphorically ignore the fog, or do nothing and hope the need for innovation will go away. Or they grasp at tendrils of the fog, they set up idea schemes, they run training programs to train everyone in creative thinking, and they hope that these will work. And they seek to control it. They set up an organizational change program to try and control the complexity and to kind of metaphorically blow away the fog. And I'm sure there's examples of where these responses have worked, but actually they all have risks. And in fact, they can be very high risks. The share price or funding can fall if they don't work. The government pulls funds, the analysts see other companies being more innovative. So the share price falls or the funding is cut. We get disengaged staff. How many of you have heard of staff submitting ideas and nothing ever happens to them? The staff become disengaged, they become disillusioned when the ideas are not picked up or when nothing happens after this great razzmatazz training that they've had. And there may be high upfront costs, long lead times, and the loss of other opportunities whilst we're all trying to work out how we manage this innovation. And worst of all, there may be little innovation, and I'll talk about that in a second. So what's an alternative? What's an alternative that we can use? And that's to work with the complexity. And to tackle complex issues, I work with a change approach called solution focus, and it includes some of these principles. Well, it includes all these principles, but there are more. Number 1 is to take small steps, just like our navigator on Dartmoor, going from rock to rock, grassy mound to grassy mound. It's about taking small steps without innovation, not trying to take the big bang approach. It's about tapping into the resources and the capabilities within the people, not bringing in huge numbers of consultants. It's about really encouraging interaction between functions and departments, because that's where many of the ideas arise. When I'm running workshops, and we always make sure that they're multifunctional, we really see that buzz going when different functions get together. And we keep it as simple as possible without being too simple. And finally, one that we don't have there is we treat each situation as different. We don't believe, or I certainly don't believe, that every company is the same, that we can go in and do exactly the same innovation process with every company. So solution focus, which you may not have heard of, is well tried and tested throughout the world, used throughout the world in many companies, and you can apply it to help people innovate, which is what I've done, especially for organizations that might choose the first two responses on slide 6, which, if you don't remember, are choose to ignore it or pull at the metaphorical tendrils to set up the idea programs, etc. So what I don't want to do is just talk about the process. What I want to do is use a case study now. So I'm just going to jump through that because of time. This case study is about Unipart Technology Logistics. UTL, as they're called, are a subgroup of subcompany of the Unipart group. And the MD requested our help to innovate. And she was interested in making UTL more innovative, and how could we help? So I explained the approach that we would take, and we went for a site visit. A colleague and I went for a site visit. So what did we see? What did we see on this site visit? Well, actually, we saw 4 strengths. One of those strengths was new and innovative areas of business. They set up these areas of business outside, actually, of their core process. It was really interesting to see. UTL are a logistics company, but they also happen to be the biggest mobile phone repairer in the country. They have lean processes, and they have the latest technology for all their different departments. They've got the latest technology for their logistics. And they're very adept at continual improvement. In fact, so good are they at continual improvement and lean processes, they actually consulted it. And they sell the thing called the Unipart way. And finally, they had a really good climate of change. And everywhere there was this sense of change wasn't something to be frightened of. It was just something to accept. So what do you think our first question was after the visit? Well, I can show you. Our first question was, why do they need us? Why did they need our help to innovate? They seem to be doing absolutely okay. So the MD explained. She had 5 issues. They had innovative silos. I'd like you to be thinking about organizations that you work in or that you know of, because there will be a question coming up at the end of these 5 issues. They have innovative silos, pockets of innovation in the organization, but mainly driven by client requests for new services. And that's indeed how the mobile phone repair came about, because they were shipping mobile phones around. Their core service is becoming commoditized. Competitors are also lean. Competitors are also using the latest technology, and it's really hard to differentiate. And when it becomes hard to differentiate, it's really hard to win bids, because all you can compete on really at the end of the day is price, and that becomes really difficult. So they needed to be more radical. They had tried an idea scheme. They had tried a training program. Neither of them had any great impact, and there were certainly no radical innovations that were coming out. So let's just ask you a question, and mouse in the right place. Are these issues common in organizations that you know? So if you'd just like to send in your thoughts. Yep, okay, we've got 2 questions there. So Janet is asking, if you find yourself as an individual in the situation of grasping at tendrils, how can you help managers and directors get out of this mindset? Well, really, it's stepping back and saying, actually, we need to consider this as a whole. We don't want to take these individual things, because if we run the training program, for example, the classic is that people go back from the training program and the culture is exactly the same as it was before, the climate is exactly the same as before, and they find that their great ideas fall on deaf ears. So we've really got to treat it in a holistic way, and that's what solution focus helps us to do. We've got Andrew Piper saying the centre is detached from those that deliver equals a silo. That's one definition of a silo. Another definition of silo is different departments like product development being completely separated from engineering, being completely separated from marketing, etc. So that's certainly an issue that we see when we look at different organisations. There's no more questions. Let me move on. So we had our site visit, and after the site visit, here's what they did. Okay, sorry, Mark Hudson's just come in there with a quick point. As long as the focus is on improving the customer experience, these issues tend to go away. Well, I'm not going to disagree with that. The experience at UTL was that they do focus very much on the customer experience, and whether those issues have gone away or not is debatable. But as I say, different companies, different organisations. I tend to agree with the sentiment behind what you're saying, the customer experience. If you can get great customer experience, you hopefully will get rid of some of these problems. So what did they do? The MD outlined a basic innovation strategy. It was no big document. It was simply their basic strategy was to pursue radical innovation in their core business. They were already doing continuous improvements, and they were perfectly happy with how that was working. They wanted radical innovation in the core business. So they set some days for a workshop, which is called the Innate Workshop Program. I'll explain Innate in a second. And they scheduled it around their operation so that it fitted in with what they do. They formed a multifunctional team of senior managers, and there was no training. All they did was we sent the team the book, and we asked them to read section 1 of my book on the innate approach, and that's what they did. So there was no actual training before. But this innate approach has 3 layers: the innate climate, the innate model, and the innate tools. And just to give you something a bit more real to grab hold of, the innate model there, as you can see on your screen, helps companies to exploit opportunities in a systematic, consistent, and innovative way. And for those of you who have done B822, and I saw at least one name on the list who had been part of one of my weekends, welcome, Chris. The innate model has a lot of similarity to the creative problem-solving model. It is not new. I did not want to invent something completely new. I want to work on the tried and tested and give it my own flavour. So at each stage, for those of you who haven't done B822, there are 3 steps: to broaden our outlook, to really expand our thinking and gather or generate information and generate ideas, etc. Focus your outlook is the 2nd step, to assemble all that information, prioritize it, and choose the most relevant. And the 3rd one, which I actually added in, was to decide. To decide if you wish to move on, whether you wish to go back a stage, whether you want to pause to gather more information, or actually whether at each stage, whether you want to abandon the proposition or the opportunity that you have selected. And that's really important. One big thing about using structured methods is it allows us to really to consider each opportunity at every stage, and if we decide to kill it, okay? So if we want to kill that idea, we can do it at the thinking stage. And one of the issues that organizations have is actually they take an idea without really exploring the opportunity, they start to implement it, and then they find that it doesn't work, and that's cost them a lot of money. So this structured approach with a 3-day workshop is about really making sure that we kill bad ideas at an early stage. So incremental to radical innovation is a huge step. I agree, absolutely. Hi, Chris, as well. And it is about organization, culture, and values more than process. Actually, I would say that it's about all of them. That's why we selected those different points of view, those flags that I mentioned earlier: the culture, the leadership, the approach to governance, and the structure. I wouldn't actually separate those out as one being more important than the other. But again, please feel free to disagree with me. So, again, looking at the case study, and this is why I'm using the case studies, because I just want to show that, hey, in certain organizations, this can work. So what they did, they ran a half-day workshop to consolidate the innate approach, to really make sure that they understood it, to begin to nurture the climate and to develop as a team. We'll talk about microclimates later, and to really initiate different ways of sensing opportunities so that they don't end up with the same opportunities as their competitors are pursuing, which again is a problem that organizations face. So any questions at that point? Okay, questionnaire, why 8 steps? You will see different models have different numbers of steps. So the 8 steps were that these were the steps I found were most effective in helping people to innovate. And we developed this model during a project we did with the Irish government, where we worked with 7 small to medium size, or large small to medium size organizations, and we used the forerunner to the innate model, and that's in that way we were able to prove that it worked for us. But I'm quite happy to accept that there are other models out there with 4 steps, with 6 steps, with 7 steps, 9 steps. There are different models, and you choose which you wish to use. Okay, so what they did too. Okay, so let me just go back a second. There was a question there. Can you elaborate a little on the opportunity sensing and how to quickly filter good opportunities from bad? This is where the multifunction teams is very important. So what we do with the innovation, with the opportunity sensing, is to have everybody actually, what we do is we tell them in advance that we're going to be asking them, but then we get them to go for a walk and talk about with a partner about their potential opportunities and what might come up. And then we get them all back in the room and we post up these opportunities and we get them all to explain them. And then we use the innate skills and knowledge of the team to really flesh out which of these that they want. We do have a 4-question kind of checklist, but essentially it comes down to the skills and experience of the team on what they think are potentially good opportunities, and actually which ones they have the energy to work on and I think are going to fly for them. So I hope that answers that. How do we work around people that immediately rule out ideas with a negative mindset? We can't do this because actually that's about setting the climate cues. So what we do right at the beginning is we set the behaviors. And one of the key behaviors is that we suspend judgments, we defer judgment. And we defer judgment when we're creating the ideas. So if someone comes up with we can't do that, we simply point to, this is the behavior that we don't want. What we want to do is build on ideas, want to build on opportunities. And in that way, surprisingly, it works very well to get people really actually in a positive frame of mind. Having said that, you will get some difficulties. We had one in Ireland where a guy had been called in off maternity leave. He was objecting every half an hour to an hour. And by the end of it, I was exhausted. My colleague had to drive us back to Dublin with me not speaking. But by the second workshop, actually, he was very in favour of what we're doing. So sometimes it's about explaining to people that what they're doing is a behaviour that they have learned. They've learned to be really good at being judgmental, and therefore we have to just point that out to them and say, look, when you do that, you kill the idea. So I hope that helps. That as a very short answer. Yeah, Janet, I'm sure you have. So, third step, what they did was to run a one-day workshop to identify and explore the opportunity. And that's where we sent them out for a walk and came back, and they came up with about 15 opportunities, all of which we capture, by the way. We don't throw any of them away. And they then explored that opportunity, clarified the opportunity, and created what we call a final innovation topic, a topic for innovation. And they also agreed, because there were some people who worked outside of the core process, that there was some information they needed for the next stage. And they actually went away and did some work on that. And so about a month later, we all met up again. And we ran a 2-day workshop this time. Sorry, I apologize, we haven't changed the screen yet. They ran a 2-day workshop. And in that workshop, we create and hone the propositions. So we generate ideas around propositions. And in fact, 15 generated 2 radical propositions. And then we shaped, because some of them wanted to work on one, some wanted to work on the other, they shaped execution strategies for both of them. They planned out a rough 18 months. This is how we would execute this if it was to get board approval. And once we've done that, we then planned some initial steps. And with solution focus, what we do is that we have small steps, what I call sprint action. And we just plan on what are we going to do in the next 2 weeks to move this forward. We don't have a big project plan. We just, what are we going to do in the next 2 weeks? So, what was the result? Oh, I apologize. Any questions? Not quite used to this system yet. Any questions? Oh, excuse me. Sorry, it's just shot there. There was a big one came in there. So, ideas wall. By setting up a spreadsheet and sending it around to the group post meeting for everyone to add their comments to. Yep, you can do that if it's what you want is ideas. One thing I'd just like to say, and Janet, I'm not sure if you mean ideas, but one problem we get, I was in Bahrain last year and working with a team from a telecommunications company, and one of the big issues is that they can't actually come in with ideas, solutions for problems rather than opportunities. And what that does is to very quickly close down your choices. So you have to be really sure that people understand what's the difference between an opportunity and an idea to tackle that. Okay, so Samarendu, being a technology and innovation management consultant. Sorry, I'm trying to read this as quickly as I can. Yep. Absolutely. Steps in techniques and processes after I realized key was engaging heart and mind. That's what we call the innate planet. Okay, and dealing with that. Yep. Thank you. That's a really good point. I hope, Janet, these comments are recorded as well. That would be really good. So workshops are getting longer. From half day to 2 days. I'm not sure what you mean, Carl. Our process is actually 3 days. We only work on large opportunities. We don't work on small opportunities. You can use this process in a quicker time, and in fact they did one in a day last week, but UTL did. But it's typically we run a 3-day process. That's just the way we work because we're working with large groups and we're working on big opportunities. So elaborate on the hone-in process. The hone-in process is we look at the proposition from a number of different perspectives. So we look at it from 7 different perspectives, very similar to De Bono's thinking hats. So that's there. Do we lay out the whole process before? We send them a book. We send them a book and we ask them to read the first section of the book. And that lays out the whole process. And amazingly, people read it. I'm really pleased because they seem to be quite keen on what they're going to be doing. So, okay, so, and I'm just looking at the time, so I just want to make sure we move on here. So, what was the results of the 2 radical propositions they created? They allocated resources to the first one. It's been to the board, and it's got agreement for just a little bit more research into 1 or 2 directions they can go, but overall highly supported. They've a number of incremental propositions that came out of the first workshop. They've run a second workshop using me. They've now licensed the Innate approach to use in-house, and they've appointed 2 facilitators to do that. So let me just write this question. What do you think of the benefits? So a question for you. What do you think of the benefits of that approach? So workshops are getting longer from half day to 2 days, and then I mean to your customers. Yeah, and that's why we sit down with the customer. I now understand your question. Yeah, we start with a half day, do a 1 day, then a 2 day. We could do 3.5 days. We did one in Switzerland where they were flown in from all around the near Asia, and so they couldn't do it in over a split time. So that was a problem. So what didn't go well in this case? Great question. Always love those ones. What didn't go well in this case? And how did we react to that? Actually, what was difficult at first, the most difficult part was not actually the process of putting everything together. It was the very first piece, after we'd spoken with the MD and we'd explained our approach, was that they tried to buy in the whole group, despite us telling them, don't do this. You know, you try and buy in the whole group, it takes time. You're trying to convince people who have got other things on their mind. They want to spend their money on other things. It just slows everything down. That's one of the big issues with organizational change. You know, the whole organization change is that you're trying to buy in all these different people and you've got no evidence to support your case. So actually what happened was, because all that's laid out in my book, I sent them my book when it got published, which was about 3 months after we first talked. And within a week, they said, great, we've given up trying to persuade the organization. We're going to do it ourselves as UTL. So I hope that explains. How did I react to it? Really, I sent them my book in the end because my verbal persuasion wasn't working. So do you do a follow-up to see how things are going? Well, with UTL, absolutely, because they've licensed the approach, so we've done that. In the Irish situation, unfortunately, the Irish government ran out of money for the second piece of the work, so we weren't able to go back in, despite the work actually being very well received by the company. So fact of life as outside people is sometimes things don't happen. So I hope that that explains. Yeah, we make phone calls, we contact them to see how things are going. So how ideas were channeled, Marine, I'm not quite sure. Can you just clarify that? How ideas were channeled? I'm just trying to think. Ah, right. Okay. Sorry. I think I know what you mean. Do you mean were they channeled in by some kind of system, ideas program? Sorry, how ideas were challenged. Okay, that changed completely. Excuse me. How were the ideas challenged? They were challenged by the people in the room who were from multi-functions. And the reason why we pretty much insist on multi-functions is that if you don't have all the departments in the room, the finance department, the ops department, etc., you can sometimes miss things. And so by having those people in the room, they were able to really, challenge the ideas and say, ooh, there could be issues here or whatever. But actually, the two ideas, the propositions that came out were certainly kicked around, but overall, everyone thought that they could work. So I hope that's it. That's part of the honing proposition. How ideas are challenged. So that's what we call it. You could call that challenging the proposition if you wanted. We call it honing. So moving, I'm just going to jump on now because I can see the time moving swiftly on. So from the benefits, the duty parts show in financial terms the impact of what they achieve given the MD's top 5 challenges in your first slide. Chris, first of all, I'm going to say that the financial terms is going to come from the fact that the proposition, which I can't mention, is going to be implemented. And so they have created a financial business case for that, which they took to the board and everyone else. They took to the board for agreement. So there was a financial case which was absolutely fine. So I hope that explains that. I actually have a video of the program manager who talks about using this approach, and he mentions about the benefits. So once my new website is up next week, you can see that video on there. So from the point of view of benefits, focus, fast, low cost, low risk. They co-created the proposition, which meant that they had much less problem getting it to the board. There was no one to object because everybody was in agreement. They only involved relevant people. We didn't train lots of people in the company. In fact, we trained no one. They just read the book. I went in, worked with them. That meant less resource. And even with the 2 facilitators, they just sat in the workshop, the second workshop, and they ran their own workshop last week after reading the book. So with experienced facilitators, they can do it themselves. And they're using a structured approach, which they were very pleased with, so they've licensed it. So very quickly, how do we deal with complexity moving forward? And how do you sustain your innovative capability? How do we deal with culture, leadership, approach, governance, and strategy? Well, that's where the solution focus comes in. So we have solution focus to push innovation through the organization. We have the innate approach to actually generate the ideas and plan a strategy for executing those ideas. So how do we deal with that complexity? Just as Unipart has done, we implement the proposition, and that helps to guide you through complexity. This isn't about spending 18 months trying to set up a culture, trying to set up a governance process to implement, to do innovation. It's about having an innovation and then working with that innovation through the board and understanding where the issues come out in the flags and dealing with those issues as they arise. They led by example. People saw that the senior managers were all in there, in those meetings. They were all leading by example. And they trusted in the abilities of the people in the room. And they actually brought in the second workshop, some junior people. And then after that, is to create more interventions as required. And that's one interesting point, which we'll talk about in the next two slides. I think I've got about 2 minutes left. So what does this do, this solution-focused approach? Well, what it does is to create a virtuous cycle. Small steps, take small steps, run workshop, do this low-risk intervention, get a tangible output. That's the most important thing. You need evidence. They get a tangible output. They get greater confidence. As they get the confidence, they take more small steps, just as my two facilitators did last week that worked for UTL. They did their own workshop. I said, would you like me to come along and sit in? No, we'd like to do it ourselves. They got the confidence. They took the step. They came up with a proposition. They got a tangible output. They got more confidence. It's just this building of a virtuous cycle. And my last point I'm going to make, because I know we're now coming up to time, is this too simplistic? So, for organizations that manage multiple innovations, my answer is probably. If they're working in consumer electronics, where they have to create new innovations every 6 months, then I'm happy to say this approach isn't for them. But actually out there is a huge number of organizations who don't know what to do, who are grabbing at tendrils, or are trying to change the whole organization. And this is a viable alternative for them. And especially those that don't actually need so much innovation. What I've realized is there are a lot of companies out there that don't need so much innovation. Even UTL was saying to me, well, actually, we've got quite a lot already here. We're not sure that we can do much more. So that's a thought I'd like to leave in your head, is that not every company needs to do huge amounts of innovation on a radical basis. Sure, continuous improvement, but when we're talking radical, how many of them can actually cope with radical innovation? So this is a compass to help them navigate the fog. It is not a wind machine to blow the fog away. So quick question there, did the propositions come from the lower levels of the organization? Actually, no, these came from the senior management the first workshop, they came from senior management. In the second workshop, as I say, we did have some juniors in that, and I couldn't tell you where the propositions actually come from. We had one in Ireland. It was a €100 million new market that they came up with, and no one remembers where the proposition came from, who actually came up with it. So, and Samarendu, I agree with you. Innovation is not a panacea. Absolutely is not a panacea. It's something we've got to tackle. Just my final point then, and I apologize, I'm a couple of minutes over, is about building the climate. One of the issues with climate is, what does it actually feel like to be working in an innovative climate? So what I do is, in these workshops, we build what we call a microclimate. And once people start to experience what an innovative climate feels like in a microclimate, they can start to spread it into the macroclimate of the organization. So in the presentation, which we'll be sending you, don't have time for the question, the action dimensions you will see here, these are based on all the work of the guys like Goran Ekval, etc. And what I've done is to turn them into actions that people can take to actually start to drive innovation. But one thing we need to remember is that innovative climate is not the same across all departments. Does the finance department have to have the same innovative climate as product development, engineering, etc., etc.? So we have a questionnaire which allows people to judge what is the climate in their departments, and actually to discuss what do we want. So we measure on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is, absolute perfection. But then we say to people, actually, what about if you were just 7? Would that be a problem? So it's about really putting that climate in place appropriate for the department. Mark, you just said innovative climate should be letting everyone put forward ideas with sponsorship from the top. And I agree with you. There's some great books around about idea schemes and how we can put ideas forward. The issue is that many of those idea schemes don't work, and even the people who write the books admit that. And they also admit that you're looking at 6 months to 18 months to actually implement them and get them working right. So, that's just something to be thinking about, is that, yes, it's great to have those ideas coming from everyone, and I agree, but this is a very focused, disciplined way of getting some radical innovation in. And spreading it, what you can do is start to spread it across the rest of the organization. Finance industry has been most innovative, unfortunately. Yes, they have. I would question whether they actually had the right challenges in place, and whether people were actually asking them whether they were good ideas. I know the head of one of the Spanish banks actually said about many of the instruments, we didn't understand the instruments, so we didn't do it. And I thought that was a very commonsensical approach to take. Unfortunately, they had building issues after that. So, power distance. Janet, can I just ask, is it okay to carry on? I know I'm 5 minutes over. If people are asking questions.
It's absolutely fine, as long as people don't mind hanging on. That's fine.
Okay,
just carry on.
Can I if I just do a wrap for those people who just want to actually finish, and then I'll happily sit in here and chat with you. So we're going to send you an article. We're going to send you this presentation with the full word. We'll send you an article about building the climate and the questionnaire. And in summary of this is innovation management, in my mind, has become a fog of complexity. Huge, huge numbers of stuff that are really important for innovation managers, but not necessarily important for many companies. Organizations sometimes tackle that innovation in less effective ways and therefore drive up costs, waste a lot of time. What we're proposing is that you can actually innovate with less risk. And if you use a structured approach in small steps, you can do it with low costs and in a short amount of time. So for those of you who want to jump off now, thank you very much indeed. For those who want to stay on and have me answer some questions, Janet, I guess it's as long as you are available.
Yes, I'm okay for a few minutes. But
yes. Question one is, are you happy to answer questions after the webinar? Absolutely, love them. Power distance, Romeo, thank you. Power distance is an issue in many organizations, and people are not opening themselves. That's a big part of the climate and a big part of the leadership. And it's about leaders really opening up. I remember one leader in Ireland said, you know, my door is always open. And a lady whispered to my colleague in his ear, yeah, but his ears are shut. And we, of course, didn't make that widespread to the group. But that's one of the issues. Another issue, big issue I found in small organizations was that entrepreneurs are regarded as the fount of ideas. They're the people who generate the ideas. And a lot of people are nervous about putting forward ideas in that case. Mark, yeah, works in BT with delivery in less than a year. Fantastic. I'm not going to dispute that. BT, big company. So that's fantastic to do that in a year. And I'm sure they had a great group of consultants, probably the people who wrote the book, doing it with them. So well done if you were one of those. So I'm not disputing other methods work. Yeah, this is not trying in any way to say that this is the only way. But this way, I find, works with companies where they're really struggling to innovate and they are looking for a way forward, and idea schemes and other things haven't worked for them. So really well done on BT. I worked with BT on a major program, and certainly idea generation, the culture was a big issue for them back in those days. So I'm glad to see that things have changed maybe. Søren, thank you very much, and
thank you, John.
Well, and thank you, everyone. If, as I say, please email me. And Janet, thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to do this. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And finally, big thanks to Tim Berners-Lee for the World Wide Web and making this possible.
Thank you very much, John. And good evening, everybody.